Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar on email deliverability. I can see we've got an awful lot of people with us, so it's obviously a really fascinating subject, and it will have a huge impact on what you're doing with your email. So what we're going to do to start off is I'm just going to push through and give you an introduction to who's actually going to be talking to you today. So in the first instance, there's myself. My name is Ben Carter. I'm the Director of Business Development at change.org. So essentially I work with organisations like the many of the that are on this call, and I help people work with change to recruit supporters and to do their email fundraising. Also with us is Alice, who's going to introduce herself.
Hi, thanks, Ben. This is Alice Cornell. I am Director of Email Deliverability here at change.org. I've been in the email space for around 15 years and really happy to be with Change now, helping them with their program.
Great, and then also with us we have Dan.
Hi everyone, yes, I'm Dan Shimshak, Director of Technology at Engaging Networks. One of my hats at EN involves managing the email team, deliver email to inboxes around the globe. Over the last few years, we have seen great growth, and with it, a lot of email. So this experience has helped us shape processes, infrastructure, and gain insights into email deliverability. So thanks for Change.org for having me on board.
Great, thank you. So now you know who we are. What we're going to do is have a look at today's agenda. I think before we go into the agenda, what I want to say is hopefully you've all noticed that there's a chat area in the screen that you're looking at. And what you can do is you can put questions into the chat at any time. And what we're going to do is we're going to look out for those questions, but we're actually going to ask them at the end because that's just far easier. But please just drop your questions in at any time as we go along, and we will have a look at them in the time that we have at the end. So the agenda that we have is we're going to start off with why email, why it's important, and then we're going to look at what is deliverability. It's a topic that not a lot of people know about. Then we're going to look at 8 steps to improve deliverability. And finally, we're going to look at what to do when you've got things wrong. But before we jump into that, I think it's probably worthwhile talking a little bit about why indeed you should be listening to us at all. You know, who are these organisations and what do we know about this topic? Change.org, I like to think that everybody on here has probably heard of Change.org, but just in case you haven't, we are the world's fastest growing platform for social change. We have over 85 million people around the world who've taken an action on Change.org, be that signing a petition or starting a petition or campaigning generally. And across the world, we've had 7,000 victories to date, where people have used this platform to bring about the change that they want to see. And email is absolutely instrumental to how we do that. In the last year, Change.org sent over 2.5 billion emails in over 20 countries worldwide. So as you can imagine, us making sure that those emails actually get into inboxes is very important indeed. What I'm going to do now is just hand over to Dan to talk a little bit about engaging networks.
Thanks very much, Ben. To those who are not yet familiar with Engaging Networks, we are an integrated digital platform used by hundreds of nonprofits around the world for fundraising, advocacy, email marketing, and data management. On the email side, we are responsible for delivering our clients' advocacy campaigns, newsletters, and fundraising appeals to global ISPs and email servers. Over the last year, we delivered roughly 1 billion emails using our highly customized infrastructure and over multiple IP addresses. This helped clients to process around 29 million transactions over this period. I'm also excited to share the stage with Ben and a very knowledgeable Alice.
Great, thank you, Dan. So I think the next question is why email? I mean, email has been around for an awfully long time, and it's used for an awful lot of different purposes. So what I'm going to do actually at this stage is we're going to jump into a poll and just find out from you guys what it is you actually use email for. So this is now up on your screens now, and if you'd just like to choose, what is it you rely on email for? And you can choose any one of these. You can choose multiple ones. It might be fundraising, advocacy, newsletters. So I can already see that fundraising is rising to the top. Newsletters, obviously, as you can imagine, are quite high there. Event invitations, not so much stuff for volunteers. That seems to be slowing down a little bit now. And if you haven't voted yet, please do so. And so the final results there are actually that fundraising is number one. I come from a fundraising background. Sorry, no, it's not. Look at that. Newsletter is now number one, with fundraising being number two and advocacy at number three. But I think what this tells us more than anything is that email is used for an awful lot of different really important activities for people working in the non-profit sphere. So what you need to do is make sure that those emails actually get through to the people that you're sending them to. Email really is your most important tool. You can almost think about it as the Swiss Army knife of online activity. There's so many good reasons to use email: scale, cost, effectiveness, and results. So, you know, absolutely vital tool. In fact, we've got some statistics here. These statistics that we have, I'm going to be honest, these are drawn from America. We're not so very good in the UK and other markets at collating this sort of information. But in America, the list size that people have of email, the list size grew by 14% since 2012. So great growth. Open rates have declined, actually, in that time, and some of that probably is down to deliverability. Click-through rates have also declined, which may also be a factor. And fundraising click-through is down too. So the story is positive on list size and maybe a little bit mixed on other areas. However, the top line is that email continues to account for 1/3 of online fundraising revenue, and that's why it's no surprise at all to see that you've all prioritized it as your most important, you know, is what you're using email for in that poll that we held earlier. Oh. So at this stage, I am now handing over to our email deliverability expert, Alice, who is going to take us forward and talk to us a little bit more about what the topic actually is.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. So absolutely, there is no question that email is absolutely super important to all of us as senders, getting that email to land in the inbox. There are many things that are important to this. One of the things I wanted to mention is it's about recently the way that ISPs such as Gmail and Hotmail have been filtering emails has become dependent on different things. The impact of engagement upon email deliverability has increased, and this is even more so through the launch of new smart inbox features. So, for example, Gmail's priority inbox or inbox tabs, and now their new inbox application all measure how each user interacts with emails, and this impacts on how those messages are delivered. So typically, email from friends and colleagues are flagged as priority mails, whereas receipts and promotions and travel information might be bundled separately. And of course, other ISPs such as Hotmail, Yahoo, and AOL have also rolled out inbox placement and prioritization techniques that reward trusted sender status and or positive engagement behavior. So we talk a lot about deliverability, and probably a few of you are wondering, what do I actually mean by that? Well, deliverability is really the art of reaching the inbox. And that sounds really simple, doesn't it? So, but unfortunately, making sure that your mail delivers correctly can be a constant effort. And that's because for the mailbox providers, such as Gmail, such as Yahoo, knowing that if their receivers receive too much spam in their inbox, they're most likely just going to move service provider. It's super important to ensure that they only deliver the mail their users want. Delivering our mail is just not a priority for mailbox providers, but keeping their users happy really is. And just to note, when I'm talking about spam here, spam used to refer to mails that were sent to con people into responding or to parting with money, but these days it's really used to refer to mail people simply don't want to receive. So I just wanted to be clear. And I think, Dan, you had some more thoughts on this.
I did. As Alice mentioned previously, with spammers' unwarranted persistence, they've created an environment where mailbox providers and ISPs constantly try to stop them. This is defined and continually pushes a landscape where bulk senders really have to follow the ISP's rules to get delivered. Reputation is built on following good practices, listening on what ISPs tell you, and making sure that you respect your supporters' subscription statuses. When we send your lists out, there are mechanisms in place that we can use to listen back to what email servers and ISPs are telling us. These feedback loops, which good email senders subscribe to, will provide notifications of complaints and in some cases reports of unknown user spikes or blacklistings. This information, coupled with soft bounces, hard bounces, transient errors, and reputational systems, allows an effective way to communicate to those who want to receive your emails. And thus, the great circle of deliverability comes into play. For effective sending and high opens, each of these areas have a role to play in good deliverability.
Absolutely, thank you, Dan. So back in the day, it used to be that content was one of the key drivers for being filtered to the spam folder. So using the word free or lots of exclamation marks was bad, but this is definitely no longer true. A study by Return Pass some time ago found that 77% of the time, it's actually reputation that determines inbox placement. Content is still important, but not nearly as much, and now much more in terms of how users respond to it than of actual content filters being triggered by keywords. Interestingly, inbox placement is more and more dependent on individual recipient behavior. So if I engage with your mail, then it delivers to the inbox. But if Dan does not engage with it, then he might see it delivered to the spam folder. Now, on the whole, senders with good reputation can pretty much include whatever content they like in their mails. And it's usually only senders with poor engagement stats or poor reputation that are more likely to be filtered due to content. So what can we do? Well, unfortunately, the rules of the deliverability road aren't always clear. In fact, each mailbox provider has different thresholds for the key metrics used to determine reputation and therefore inbox placement. So what may be true at Hotmail may not be true at Yahoo or at Orange. Now, this is a particular challenge for any global organization, as we know well, as many mailbox providers are really reluctant to share this kind of information and data to prevent spammers from gaming the system. So over to Ben for another brief poll.
Yep, sincere apologies there, a technical hit. So what I would like to know for this poll, which you're already conducting, which is great, is how you actually send your emails. Are you doing it via an ESP? Are you doing it in-house? Seems to be a pretty even mixture of them both. And it doesn't look like there's any more answers coming in. Oh, no, they're still pouring in. But the overall winner does look to be via an ESP. While I've actually also got your attention, I'd also like to remind people, please, please, please do drop questions into the chat box so that we've got something to talk about at the end of the session, because Alice and Dan will be very keen to get those. So closing the poll off now, 50 responses for ESP and 29 for in-house. Back to you, Alice, I believe.
Great, thank you, Ben. That's really interesting and good to know, because it means I can give the right sort of tips for how to what we're going to talk about next is really all about the steps that you can take to improve your deliverability. So everything we've been talking about is really to say that email is really important, and the best, and we need to think about some of the best ways that we can make sure our email always reaches that inbox. So step one, getting the basics right is really important to have a good foundation for your program. Now, if you're using an ESP, as obviously many of you are, ESP email service provider, then the heavy lifting for you for setting up your infrastructure correctly has probably already been done. And engaging networks will have this covered for you for those of you using them. But for those of you sending in-house, some of the key elements, and you probably know most of these, are the first one is the most obvious. You must have a working unsubscribe in every message. And sometimes it's worth remembering that you think your unsubscribe's working, but things can go wrong. So test it regularly to make sure that you're comfortable that that is working the way that it should. Really important for users to be able to unsubscribe. Next up is implementing authentication. So definitely including SPF and DKIM and possibly DMARC for every mail stream. And these forms of authentication are essentially proving you are a real and bona fide sender whose traffic is trustworthy. And I'll share some information at the end about how you can do that if you're not sure you have it implemented correctly. The next thing I want to mention are feedback loops. Feedback loops are how ISPs such as Hotmail or Yahoo help us handle user complaints. And I'll come back to that in a moment in a little bit more detail. Now, it's great to have dedicated IPs where possible, as it means that your email sends can't be affected by the reputation of other possibly poor senders. However, most ESPs take great pains to ensure they don't have any bad apples on their pool of shared IPs. And I know that engaging networks manage their shared pool very carefully, and this can actually be beneficial for some smaller senders because you benefit from other senders' good reputation. Bounce processing is next up, and this means managing invalid addresses in your database. Bounce messages also hold invaluable data indicating how healthy your database is. So if you're getting a bounce coming back saying this address does not exist, you should be deleting that from your database. Connection and throughput speeds, each ISP, are also important. And that means making sure that you're sending the appropriate amount of messages per provider, as these vary, particularly in Europe. So some like a slower send, less messages per connection, and some connect more. Now, finally, building up the reputation of your IPs and domain is essential. And domain reputation is becoming more and more important rather than just IP reputation. If you should change your IPs, you definitely need to warm the new ones by increasing volume on them slowly and steadily. If you damage the reputation of your IP or IPs, you're much better to stay with it or them to fix that reputation. Because swapping from IP to IP is viewed as very spammy behavior. Then over to you. Well, we seem to have lost Ben, so we thought we'd just throw this out to the crowd.
Sorry, muted. There we are. What an error. I am back. So what I just wanted to say is really good to see the questions coming in. One that I can answer right now to save people writing lots and lots and lots of results out is that, yes, these slides will be available after the presentation. But the poll is, do you know what these acronyms mean? How many of them I would know? Well, we shall see. We've got quite a high number knowing what HTML is, quite a high number knowing what ISP is, very few knowing what DMARC is, and it looks like all the answers are in. Very good. Okay, moving on.
Thanks, Ben, and that's really interesting to see. Of course, I tend to use these acronyms with impurity, thinking that everybody knows what I'm talking about. So it's really great to be pulled up to say, actually, what on earth are you talking about, Alice? The SPF and DKIM portion of this is about authentication, and DKIM, which seems to be the least known before DMARC, DKIM is really probably the most important, which is a way of authenticating your messages by encrypting each message and keeping a key within your DNS record. But as I say, I'll share some more information about that at the end of the talk. So now we are going to talk about reducing complaints, because complaints are one of the most important factors in determining reputation. If our subscribers are complaining about our mail, then ISPs are going to have to react, and they're going to react by filtering or even blocking our mail to protect their users. But what are complaints? So as you can see, there's quite a few different ways a subscriber can register a complaint, but most frequently they hit the report spam button or equivalent in their email client. These complaining addresses are fed back by the ISP in a lot of cases, e.g. Hotmail and Yahoo, via a feedback loop, which is what I mentioned earlier, and they come back to senders for removal from the database. Because if somebody's hitting "this is spam," you don't want to be sending further mail to them. So what else can we do about reducing complaints? Well, it's all about providing the user with a good experience. Just by removing complainers from our database, it means that we're going to cut out those complainers, but we need to address why people are complaining about the mail in the first place. Why do they feel that your message is spam? So some things that we can do around this are really around the user experience. The first thing is only send to users that have opted into your email program. So users that said, yes, I'd like to receive emails from you. Setting expectations is also really important. So people know why they're receiving the mail. When it appears in their inbox, they understand why they're getting it and why they're getting it from you. Mailing frequency is also important. So not too few messages so that people forget who you are, but certainly not too many. You don't want to be drowning people in your mails, because that's the quickest way to have them unsubscribe from your program. And as with all things email, this really needs to be optimized through testing to see what will work best for your program, because frequency, it can be a very particular thing depending on your audience. Now, it's good to have clear, consistent branding, and this is to build trust with your subscribers so that they can easily recognize a mail is coming from you, and they trust that they can open and engage with it. And finally, I probably can't say this often enough, making your unsubscribe clear and easy to use. It's much, much better for users to be able to unsubscribe from your program than for them to complain, as complaints damage your reputation. Now, by the way, if you are having a problem with complaints, or you suspect you are, sometimes putting your unsubscribe link at the top of the page can be a really quick fix to help people to be able to unsubscribe rather than to hit the "this is spam" button. And of course, if you see high unsubscribes, then you may well be sending the wrong content or the wrong frequency or the wrong time, and that's something that you need to figure out and fix. Now, here's an example of how a fail in our user flow impacted deliverability. So a change to the change.org site meant that our unsubscribe landing page, which should confirm successful unsubscription, was replaced with our home page. And users thought the unsubscribe wasn't working, and so they hit the "this is spam" button. And I saw the impact of this straight away at Hotmail. But luckily, we had the correct pages confirming the unsubscribe quickly restored for each country without doing too much damage to our reputation. So you can see how a change to user experience can really affect your deliverability. Now, the next most important thing, or probably as important, is data hygiene. So a good email program is all about the quality of your data. Keeping your list clean by removing invalid addresses and hard bounces, and full of people who are excited to get your mail is essential. There are some warning signs if your data starts to become unhealthy, and one of the key signs are spam traps. Now, there are two types of traps. There are honeypot, or also known as pristine or true traps, and these are addresses that have been created and planted on the internet to catch people with poor data collection practices, i.e. the buying and selling of harvested data. So a bot that crawls across the internet snatching addresses, and unscrupulous people may make a list of those and sell them to the unsuspecting. Triggering even one of these can have a serious impact on deliverability. If it causes you as a sender to be listed at a major blacklist, that can affect delivery to all the major mailbox providers, or a large proportion of them. There are also what are known as recycle traps, and these are old addresses that have been retired by a mailbox provider and then turned into spam traps to highlight poor data hygiene practices. So these don't usually have such a major impact on deliverability, but they act as a warning sign that you need to clean your data. Now, some people waste time searching for spam trap addresses. It's much, much more important to tackle the source of the traps. And that means never buying data that has not given express consent to receive your mail. So gaining express consent from new users via a third party should prevent no problems as far as spam traps are concerned. Whereas buying a static list of addresses, however, is a really dangerous practice, because you've got no idea of the permission levels or of how old that data is. And as a good example of this, I'm going to hand you over to Dan.
Thanks very much, Alice. So a good time, for example, to what fits into what Alice has mentioned, and also what will be touched on in the next few slides. In this particular example, from a larger client that joined Engaging Networks early 2014, it all started with subpar open rates. On further inspection of the reporting tools in their account, which is what you can see on the screen, it was plain to see that while the number of complaints and unsubscribes was certainly high, the number of hard bounces that were occurring was pointing to something that had changed. So over the next couple of sends, it was clear that open rates were failing to rise and that supporters' glee for these snappy monthly emails was certainly waning. Often the case, it is easy to see that there is a problem. Where the problem actually lies, however, is harder to pinpoint. So behind the scenes, we were also seeing that something was up. Hotmail's SNDS services and sender scores reputation scoring was helpful in saying that something on the list was causing problems. We also noticed that some ISPs had flagged the sender enough times that the IP address was appearing on blacklists. What proved difficult in this example is that they were a new client, so knowing all their supporters' send histories was something we didn't have access to. Another item that was that they didn't do much segmenting, so essentially something in a big list was causing problems. In these situations, looking for commonalities in the data is useful. Do the supporters who have complained, unsubscribed, or hard bounced have something that stands out? Have they been tagged in a certain way? Are they actually subscribed? Have they taken the same action? Or do they have the same create date? In this case, create date and opt-in status looked the same. Could this be an import? Checking the import file history in Engaging Networks, though, nothing stood out. And what I mean by the create date is that there was a certain date that these users had, and opt-in status looked like they had been opted in. But on further digging, I noticed that there was a CRM import on the 16th. So curiously, I had a dig, and an answer ended up being a rogue query in a CRM that grouped previously suppressed and inactive supporters into the current list. It now meant that really old supporters and previous hard bouncers were now included in an intended opt-in list. The process of cleaning up the list was slow and a somewhat painful one, but afterwards they were able to confidently hit their year-end campaign running. During the process, it became apparent that it was too difficult to know who were valid and who were not, as some of their processes had changed in-house with the CRM. So we ended up segmenting into groups as best we could, marking those who we knew had opened emails and took actions as actives. And then we started sending small batches of emails every day to wean out the hard bounces and to not try to trigger large-scale unknown supported flags in ISPs. Whilst this example was a particular issue that does not relate to all organizations, it does show that data processes are important. It also shows that ISPs don't like to be shocked with complaints or unknown users. So data hygiene stems a lot from where you get your data, how you manage your data, and also what feeds into your data. It is also worth noting that the age of your list is something to bear in mind, which leads us on to sunsetting users. Aged and inactive records are one of the primary reasons that most senders have spam traps in your database. An inactive address can be recycled by an ISP in as little as 9 months. So changing how you approach inactive users is a great best practice. And what we mean by recycled by an ISP in as little as 9 months is, so, for example, my old email address of unicorns_groovy1272@hotmail.com. I stopped using that, say, maybe 2 years ago, but I was active for 7 years. Over the period, Hotmail then sees that I haven't logged into the account. I'm not using the account, so they'll turn the email into a recycled inbox. So if I haven't logged in and not checking emails within a year and a half, then presumably any email that comes in could be spam. So ergo, they think that, well, likely email in these inboxes could be spam related. So it is really worth finding out or coming up with a policy where you get to know the age of your list and act accordingly. As unengaged subscribers are also more likely to respond negatively to mail, it is important to continually engage the segment, but to do so carefully as to not impact your overall deliverability. So to recap on this slide, it's best to define, meaning define a policy, implement something that you can communicate with these sunsetting users, and also identify them. So something like a series to re-engage, and then if you aren't seeing any of them coming back, let them go. If they want to come back, they will naturally make it onto your list if they enjoy your brand. But it is really quality over quantity when it comes to email. Thanks very much, Alice.
Great, thank you. That's really interesting to see an actual example of how poor quality data can affect deliverability. But another reason that sunsetting users is also necessary is that engagement is actually becoming one of the most important metrics of sender reputation. So are recipients opening or replying to your mail? Are they adding a sender to their safe senders list or their address book? Engagement is measured in different ways by different mailbox providers, and inbox placement differs from user to user depending on their engagement. However, the ISP measures of engagement are sometimes different to what we might think of as our measures of engagement. So some positive measures are opens. Opens always indicate the recipient interest in the mail, so that's definitely positive. A reply to a message, it's considered a super strong signal of engagement. So if you ever needed evidence that using a no reply at email address is a bad idea, there you have it. Somebody saying that a mail is not junk, so moving it from their spam folder to their inbox, this is a very strong positive signal that the message should not be considered spam, of course. And just one of these is enough to mend poor reputation in a lot of cases, or go a long way towards it. If you move mail to a folder, if you're saving messages for later, it means that you care about them, and that's definitely a positive measure of engagement. And as I mentioned before, adding the sender address to somebody's address book, it shows that the sender matters to that recipient. Now, of course, there's negative measures as well. Somebody moving the message to their junk folder, so hitting the "This is spam" button, is a strong negative signal. And this is, as I said before, one of the most important in the negative measures. But also worth considering is how many people are deleting messages without opening. This is definitely a negative measure, because of just even a quick glance at the sender subject line, the recipient has decided they're not interested in the mail and they've just deleted it straight away. Definitely a negative signal there. So these are all part of the complicated algorithms that different ISPs have set up. So there's a lot of other things to consider, of course. For example, Hotmail has a panel of trusted users that they ask to vote on whether a message is spam or not. And they put a lot of emphasis on those votes. And it's hard for us as senders to know how we are performing there. Yahoo, for example, used the ratio between "this is spam" and "this is not spam" as a key measure of engagement. But really the question is, are users interested in the mail we're sending them? And this is even more important with the advent of the smart inbox functionality that I mentioned earlier. So, and also consider filtering due to subscriber engagement is really dynamic. So if people start complaining about our messages, the mailbox provider may choose to filter it to the spam folder. However, if enough people have positive engagement, they open or move our mail from the spam folder to the inbox, then the filtering can switch back to inbox delivery. And this can actually happen multiple times during a single send. And as I mentioned, deliverability has recently become much more personal. So individual recipient behavior will impact how a message is delivered to them. So what can you do about subscriber engagement? Well, setting expectations, also super important here. Make people aware of what kind of mail they're going to receive and how often they're going to receive it. Targeting and segmenting your database, we'll talk about it in a little bit more detail. But think about personalizing your mail as much as possible. And that's based not just on the data you have for them, such as first name or the town they live in, etc., but also on their previous behavior within your site and on your email, for example. Now, where appropriate, mix up your content where you can. Don't just be saying the same old thing. Make your mail interesting, well, as if you wouldn't. But also learn from mails that aren't so successful. So what can we do better next time? Try and be relevant. I mean, after all, if no one's opening your mail, then why send it? It also could be useful to allow your recipients to be in control of what you're sending them as much as possible. You might want to promote a preference center, for example, or consider letting users manage the frequency of their mail once a week or once a month, whatever suits them. However, I'm always a big fan of letting the data tell the story. I mean, for example, at Change, we find that regularly sending to our whole list actually improves overall engagement. Finally, as Dan touched on, consider a win-back strategy for those less engaged recipients. So as users engage with you less, you might need to tailor what and how you communicate with them to bring them back into the fold. So over to Dan for an example.
Thanks, Alice. So just carrying on to what Alice mentioned on segmenting, in that not only does it help for personalization, it can also help in reporting and data management. Remember the previous example that I had? If we knew a little more on which segment was affected most, it would have helped isolate issues. Here is another example pertaining to year-end in the USA. This could, however, relate to any important delivery send that you may have. So over a few months, we saw a particular client's reputation drop on certain days. After investigation, it became apparent that two segments, one of sunsetting users and another who came from a list outside their department, were causing these dips. So sometimes organizational policies trump processes, but smart emailing can help you reach those supporters without degrading your good lists. And in this particular example, Alice touched on that sending to your majority of your list sometimes can help bolster overall improvement. In this particular example, because the list was outside of their department, it was tricky for them to then engage with that particular list and sort of wean out who doesn't want to do it because of another department's processes. But to safeguard these good lists, but also not lose out on potential earnings from the others, they sent them on the last final days after the others had gone out. So particularly in the US, the last 6 days of the year end is a big fundraising time with lots of tax incentive. So you'll see organizations raising a lot of money by sending emails out literally every day. So during that time, ISPs can even be more sensitive to the emails they receive. So being able to make sure that you don't send a bad batch to affect your good batch the next day is important. Another note in maybe year-end for the US subscribers is that when it comes to a big send, is sometimes don't try find every supporter that you may have and then maybe email them just in case. This is an example that fits into this, is that if you do have a list that you want to email, has been tested, try send them on different days so you can isolate the issues and test them, for example. So in this particular example, once they had sent on those at year end, thereafter they only sent to their active lists to make sure reputations were kept stable. Thanks, Alice.
Yeah, that's great, and I know this one quite well also. We at Change had a change to our terms of service recently, which meant that we needed to email every one of our users, which definitely threw up some challenges. And we found that we needed to balance out our active and our inactive data segments to make sure that we didn't affect our deliverability. So that was definitely close to my heart. But moving forward, I've mentioned way back at the beginning that a proportion of filtering is still due to message content, so still really important. it's worth thinking that every message you send promotes your organization. So make sure you've got clear and consistent branding, that your email template is well structured, so no stretched images, etc., and you've got good, clean HTML. Spammers will cobble their messages together from any old code or content, so make sure yours looks good. And of course, there's a huge variety of email readers and environments these days. So it's really important to test every message before sending. Do you know how your mails render in mobile? Do they look good in Gmail on an iPad as well as in Hotmail on a desktop? And do you know what the majority of your users are viewing your mail on? Another thing to keep in mind is making sure that your templates are legally compliant in the country that you're delivering to. And also remember that some email readers still do block images by default. So don't rely solely on images to communicate your message. You need to include alt tags where possible. And keep in mind that some programs for the visually impaired rely on these alt tags to communicate the message. And as a final bonus tip, avoid using public bit.ly or other shortener domains, because these can be viewed as really spammy. It's much better to use a proprietary shortener domain instead. For example, I think we use ch.nge.org. And this means that the ISPs can build reputation on those links. They know that they're you, and that a public domain could be used by a spammer. Now, finally, our step 8 is try to keep tabs on how your mail is performing. So I would say one of the first things is to test your mail as if you were receiving it as a subscriber. So how does it perform in Gmail, in Hotmail, on an iPad, on mobile or mobile devices, etc.? There are several companies that offer services that use either seed addresses or panel data to help understand inbox placement and rendering, but you can create your own test addresses at mailboxes that are relevant to you and to make sure that you're looking at them on devices that are relevant to your user base. There are lots of other free tools that you can use to monitor reputation. There's SNDS, which is Smart Network Data Services at Hotmail, which will let you know what your reputation is looking like at Hotmail for those of you with dedicated IPs. But you can also check out senderbase.org, mailtester.com, and of course the postmaster sites for many ISPs. AOL and Yahoo, for example, have good postmaster sites. So there's lots of free tools. Don't worry about writing those down. I'll provide a list of them at the end. So there's many more. I'll include as many as I can. But there are also free sites, of course, that tell you if you're blacklisted anywhere. So look out for those in the follow-up information from the webinar. And finally,
sorry.
So go on, Ben. Over to you briefly.
Yes, yeah, well, I was just going to say for this last part of the webinar, we're nearly at the end and we're going to get on to questions shortly. But despite all that amazing advice, we still get things wrong. So what do you actually do in order to recover when you have made a mistake, Alice?
That is so true, Ben. We've all done it. Whether it is sending your whole data set in error or sending an incendiary subject line to all your sunsetted users, it's a cold hand on your heart, which I have to say I know, but hopefully we haven't all felt it too often. But the main thing to do is don't panic. So if you continue to send with your usual best practice in place, your reputation will usually repair pretty quickly. And in cases where it doesn't, most major mailbox providers provide a ticketing system of some sort where you can ask for advice on what you've done, what you're doing wrong, or you can explain the mistake that you've made, whether you've sent to all your unsubscribed users in error. Usually, a one-off mistake you can be forgiven for. So here's an example. One of my campaigners sent a mail to 5 million sunsetted users, and they sent it in 2 parts, aged sunsets and recent sunsets. And I tell you, I had kittens that day. But the results were uncomfortable, but they were interesting. The aged sunsets were blocked at Gmail, and I expect that was due to the very low user engagement that set had, whereas the recent sunsets were filtered 100% at Hotmail. And I think that's due to high user complaints, because users in this segment were unengaged, but clearly a lot more vocal about it. And so this did have a major knock-on effect for all our traffic, but was resolved within 48 hours. So how did we do it? Well, we continued to send as usual until our usual good reputation reasserted, and the ISPs could see it was just a one-off anomaly and forgave us for it. But you might also want to consider sending to your active users only, or even reducing your connection and throughput speed in some cases. But the main thing is to remember there's no need to jump to a new set of IPs or a new IP, because I've never come across an IP whose reputation couldn't be fixed. So maybe that's because I've just been working with the best people. But that's what I would recommend.
I think that's a really important point there, actually, that you can follow all these measures, you can do everything you can to get it right. But if it's a mistake and it's a genuine mistake, then you can claw back from it. Whereas if you're an actual spammer and you just change IP and you just do something different, well, they're going to notice that. So far better to make the mistake and fess up to it and try and correct it than to panic and do something completely different.
Absolutely right.
Okay, well, that actually brings us to the end of the main content, but we've still got quite a bit of time for the many questions that have come through. I don't honestly think we're going to get the chance to go through all of them, but those that we don't, we've got your contact information and names of the people who've sent them in, and we will endeavour to come back to you. So what I'm just going to do is pick through quite a few of these and see where we get to, and I'll just allocate who to speak to. So the first question we've got here is from Leah Rice. And the question is, my organisation has lots of lists which I'm convinced have a ton of old contact details, and I think these are bringing our email stats down. So the question is, how can I make sure my list is made up of people who really do want to hear from us without starting again or losing those who are engaging with our email communications? This is actually a problem for Change.org as well, so I'm going to put this one to you, Alice.
Thanks. And yes, it's a problem for a lot of people. And there are several things that you can do. So what I would do in that situation is I would try to look at the last date that a user had engaged with your mail or even on your site. And perhaps you want to think about saying anybody that hasn't engaged with us in over a year or 18 months or 6 months, whatever's right for you, just letting their data go, as Dan said, because sometimes people get really obsessed with the quantity of addresses they have on their list, whereas you're much better to worry about the quality of the addresses that you have on your database. So looking at the last time that they engaged with you, but I'm also, with my business hat on, thinking, well, I don't want to lose supporters. I don't want to lose people that might still re-engage with us. So if you can't analyze your data to tell you what the cutoff point for people most likely to re-engage with you is, you might want to consider recommissioning your user base. So reaching out to them saying, we haven't heard from you in a while. Do you still want to receive emails from us? Or perhaps you want to design a win-back campaign with particularly engaging data that you're trying to sort of persuade people that they do want to receive your emails and engage with them, or open them and respond to them in the way that you need.
Great, thank you, Alice. Leo, I hope that has answered your question. You can still feel free to follow up in the chat there. We're going to move to a question from Michael now, and this one I'm going to put to you, Dan. What do you think are some of the best practices to help invalid or malformed emails from entering your web form or POS system?
That's also... Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, sorry. So that's theoretically spam addresses coming in via web forms, if I'm correct. In some ways, this can be very difficult, and something we have to deal with. Sometimes you're lucky in that there's robots that scan over the sites, and they could do things. They'll put things like handbags or buy now. So sometimes the data it's clear to see that that's a spam address. Unfortunately, there are spammers whose robots are sophisticated enough to use real names and email addresses that look very similar. And in those cases, you can only really rely on hard bounces or things like that coming back from the ISPs. So on your web forms, sometimes if you are seeing an increased amount of invalid spam-related inputs, best to put a captcha, maybe just temporarily, things like that, or have a review of what you're capturing. So sometimes only capturing email address in these cases, it's hard to note who has come in, but if you add a little more data, then you can start seeing, then at least I can start seeing that the first name and the last name address are the same, so which is a very spammy indication, things like that. So in terms of whittling out the robots, it can be very difficult, and sometimes there is a bit of manual data management that you can see. But sometimes an indication of this has happened is that when you see your reports, you can see your hard bounces go up higher a bit. That's generally the key metric, is that you, for usual sends, you'd be fine, and then suddenly you'll see your opt-in list has increased a little, and then with it hard bounces. And then sometimes if you then export who has hard bounced that list, you can sort of see that for a particular date, you may have had some spam robots over web forms. So it's a bit of a tricky one, unfortunately, and I wish I could throttle them because they make everyone's life harder.
Oh,
I think that's agree. Sorry, Alice, go.
I was going to say there's a couple more things that I would add, and I agree. It's, keeping clean data is really, really tricky, and making sure that bad addresses don't enter your database can be difficult. So there's also, you might consider adding a script to the point of sign up if somebody miskeys a domain that says, you put Gmail rather than Gmail. Did you really mean it? And there are different levels of email address verification that you can use. Either, that's a sort of basic level. There are lots of third-party organizations who would love to help you with that at a cost, I'm sure. But of course, the most stringent way of making sure that every address that joins your database is valid is to implement what we call double opt-in, which is where somebody gives you their address. You then send an email to that email address saying, well, it's really you, and they need to confirm that they are an active address by clicking on a link within that message. But of course, that can have a knock-on effect for list growth. However, it's very, very good for list quality. I'm not sure it's something I would recommend in every case.
Guys, I'm going to pick a shorter question here because it's actually one that when I first started working in this area, I had no idea what was meant either. This is from Jamie. What is meant by sunsetted users? I think this could go to either of you, actually. So we just heard from you, Alice, there. So how about you, Dan?
Yeah. Essentially, it's defining how old your list is. So theoretically, if I joined your list a year ago and I was active in the first 6 months, for example, but then I've tailed off and I've started to not really want to receive your emails, if I haven't done anything for the last year or 2 years, am I really an active supporter or am I sunsetting? So it's this idea of seeing your supporters as a whole list, but then obviously within that list there's your active list. There's those who are probably more than likely if you email them, but then there's also a set that if you target them correctly could come back, but there are those who are sunsetting and more than likely are going to fall away to clear them up. So when we talk about sunsetting, it's almost defining a policy within your organization. So I was at a conference a few months ago, and I just asked the room, what's your policy for defining sunsetting users or inactives? And some were, some clients were, we don't have one. And then another one was like, it's 3 years. And then everyone was like, well, that's a bit long. And then they were like, we know, but we can't really do anything about it because it's organizational policy. So it's almost trying to find out in your organization, what's that time frame between people who have taken action and who are regular subscribers to those who are actually not taking part and who could affect deliverability because they're not actually engaging with you at all. Hopefully
great, thank you. I hope that's answered the question. We've got a slightly longer one this time, and this is from Brittany, and it says, our list has grown considerably over the past 3 years. We do a great job of welcoming new subscribers and setting expectations. I'm wondering if you've all got any experience by sending out an email to specific email carriers like Gmail, AOL, Hotmail, etc., and giving them a step-by-step guide for marking our emails as safe and to show up that they do appear in their inbox. Have you ever tried this? So as your list grows, contacting those carriers and essentially letting them know that you've got new lists, new data coming in, and hopefully this will stop you getting blocked. And I think probably Alice for this one.
I understand the question a bit differently, and tell me if it's wrong, Brittany, but I'm thinking you're saying but you're interested in including a step-by-step instruction to the people receiving your mail about how to get delivered into an ISP such as Gmail and Hotmail, because I don't think that ever contacting any of the ISPs to say we've got a new email list would get you very far, because those ISPs haven't got time to discuss that with you. But I know if that's what you mean, then I have had some experience with this, and really it's a matter of testing. And there's some people it works for. So yes, I have had experience where I will say to my Gmail users, this is in a previous incarnation, I'll say to my Gmail users, do you know that you can add us to your safe senders list, or if you like a star us to be a priority mail? And there were some questions around this as relating to Gmail, the Gmail tabs, and how people should be in the promotions tab, or if they should be in the updates tab or the inbox tab, and what they could do about it. And there was a lot of people or a lot of people in the industry that did message their users to say, move our message from the promotions to the inbox, because we want to make sure that you always receive our messages. And I think that most of the time those types of communications backfired slightly, whereas actually adding a line of text at the top of your template that says add us to your safe senders list to make sure that we always get your mails, and even that could have a hyperlink to a page where you give step-by-step instructions on how to do it, could work really well. But it's something that you would have to test for your database particularly, or for your users, because you know your audience best, and that's going to change for probably everybody on this call. But going back to the promotions tab, etc., that seemed to backfire a little bit, asking people to move the mail, because it's very difficult to get enough people to do that, to make the change at Gmail to move from promotions to inbox. And in a lot of ways, it seems like it could even be a bonus to be in the promotions tab, since Gmail introduced the new grid view, which includes an image, and it makes the mail look much more exciting and I think much more engaging. So sometimes I think that's a good idea, and sometimes not, and I think it's something you need to test for your users.
Great, thank you, Alice. We're actually on a 2-minute warning before the end of this webinar. So what I wanted to do is I pick one last question that might turn into a bit of a debate, because I'm going to offer my own answer to this as well, and then see if Alice and Dan disagree. And this question is coming from Sue, and what she asks is, as a good standard, what is the appropriate number of emails we should send to our email list each month? Now, I come from a fundraising and campaigning background, and I say that there almost is no maximum, and I would be emailing my users every week, even though that will impact your unsubscribe and open rate. It means you get more open rates overall and therefore more actions. But I'd like to hear from Dan and Alice to see if you have a differing opinion.
I probably agree with you in that a lot of our clients do fundraising emails. But I also believe message content can be a big factor in this, is that if you are sending out engaging emails, then theoretically, the more you send and they're engaging, then you wouldn't necessarily have this problem. I think that if you're sending email out that people don't want to read, then you'll see your unsubscribes. But I do believe that there can be too much, and you can generally maybe see this in your unsubscribe numbers. But I also believe that there's times for it. So obviously in the US, the year end, people are naturally more likely to allow more emails to come through. Whereas if you had a heavy period, then possibly giving your supporters a break, for example, would also help.
I would agree with you, Dan, and and much as Ben, I applaud your enthusiasm. I would say that you would need to be. With my deliverability hat on, I'd say be careful, and as Dan said, watch your metrics. If you see the negative metrics start to outweigh the positive metrics, then you know that you need to make a tweak in that program. But if you, for me, you can send as much mail as you want. Exactly as you said, Dan. If people are engaging with it, if they want to receive it, if they're enjoying it, then go for it. But if you start to see signs that they're not, then you might want to rein it in or to change the content or the tone of what you're sending.
Yeah, I might just also add that this is where segmenting can also help. In that, if you're doing large emails to your entire list, but being able to segment them, you might get better results because those who are segmented and interested into that particular idea would obviously open emails more.
I love how on that one we've ended up all giving roughly the same answer, but with a bit more technical nuance from each of us. Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining the webinar. I just want to remind you that the recording will be made available after the webinar, so you can send that to whoever you want, or indeed you can listen to it multiple times if you haven't heard enough already. And any of the questions that we can get on to, we will forward any of those that we didn't answer, or indeed you can contact us at our relative contact information if there's more things that you forgot to ask. And that brings us to the end. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, everyone.